Right then, there we go. We are live. It's 1:30 p.m. It's Sunday, and we are episode 33 of Unchat Live. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching live, and if you're listening on the podcast or watching YouTube, then thank you very much. So here we go. Very excited today. I've just been chatting to our guest for quite a while, actually. Dr. Izzy Moore will be with us very shortly, and we're going to be talking about. I've really tried to push this, as always, but on social media for therapists, because the question of how much research should you be following, how do you tell what's quality research and not a lot of the poor stuff that's out there? I think they're really important questions for all therapists, all healthcare professionals, if you're claiming to stay up to date with current best practice and evidence-based practice. So yeah, it's going to be a good one. I'm hoping that a lot of you benefit from it. Before I do that, I'd like to mention, I forgot last week, so I felt terrible about that, but our sponsors, the Brighton Beer Company, very thank you to them. As always, if you are the Hirsute member, then make sure you do head over to the brightonbeercompany.co.uk. They have some fantastic products. Obviously, I'm a user myself. Let's just bring them up and have a little look at their website. There we go. Yeah, definitely head over there. They have got some fantastic offers, and you can get an offer too from us if you just use the code, where are we? RCL20. Then you will get 20% discount off their products. So what's better than that? Just RCL20, and you can get yourself, whether it's balms, oils, brushes, beautiful kind of bags and stuff, grooming bags. It's all there. So make sure you have a little look for our wonderful sponsors. Also want to mention, I also said on social media, just before I bring Dr. Izzy Moore up, I've had quite a few emails about people who are interested in starting podcasts themselves. It used to be quite a scary thing, didn't it? But now everybody's kind of like, oh, actually, I want to do that. It's a great way of engaging with people. And if you've got something good to say, then it's a good way of doing it. And so obviously I've had a look around. I've used different formats, but I'm very happy with the software I use at the moment. And I chatted with them, and obviously they're happy for me to tell you about it. So BeLive, so it's, you can reach it. It's either BeLive.tv or B.live, but that's the software I use. Obviously I'm biased because I use it, but it's everything that I need, and I would definitely recommend that you use it, especially if you're just starting out and you want something that's simple, minimum problems in terms of how much you're going to have to edit it afterwards. It's minimal. In fact, you don't really have to edit it really at all. What I would suggest is they do a free introductory trial. It used to be 15 days, but with this link I'm going to give you, you actually get 33 days to test it out. And you don't have to go directly live. You can test it out yourself, watch it back. You could do it privately with a friend or something. But it really is a great bit of software. And with the link I'm going to give you, they've also got this competition at the moment where if you sign up before the end of September, then you could win. You're going to need a decent mic. I don't have to spend more than £100, but the mic on your laptop's not going to be great. You're going to need a USB mic. And they've got one of the best ones out there, definitely, which is the blue Yeti mic. It's the blackout edition. Let's have a little picture on there. The blue Yeti mic is the one that you'll see whenever you do a search for what mic should I be using for podcasting. This one will come up. It's the standard one, which they recommend, a USB mic, which has got gain control and everything. So yeah, if you sign up for a test on BeLive software, then your name will go into a little hat, and they will draw a winner, I think on October the 1st, and give one of you a free, I think it's probably about 100, look at the price, 120 pounds or something, for a blue Yeti mic. So that's well worth doing. The link you'll need, I'll make sure it flashes up underneath as well, but if you're listening on the podcast, basically it's trial, as in TRIAL .be.live/podcasting. So that's trial, TRIAL.be.live/podcasting. Okay. No credit card needed to get on the trial thing. Nothing at all. Don't worry. They're lovely people. They're global. They've got a great help desk as well, which you can reach within 5 minutes. Literally, they're there waiting to help you. So free trial. Your name goes in. You could win this microphone. I recommend it. I'm not getting anything for this. I just kind of recommend it. I like to help people out there. So there you go. Okay, and let me know how it goes. Right, that all said and out the done. Anything else I need to say? I'm very keen to get Dr. Moore up here. I don't think so. No, that's it. Right, episode 33. Let us bring up Dr. Izzy Moore as a name, which if you look after runners and you follow the research, well, the name should be there. And as I always say with my guests, if it's not there, then not shame on you, but I'm going to make your life better because it should be there. So many published papers which are relative, gateway training and various running injuries, very current, very respected. So I'm very happy to bring her to you today. She's also going to be speaking at the Run Check Live conference, which I'm very excited about because she, by her own admission, hasn't done a lot of conferences. So I'm very honoured to be able to present her with all the other speakers down in Brighton on October the 30th and 31st. Tickets are still available for that, so make sure that you do head over to RCL2019.eventbrite.com and snap that up. All details are on runchecklive.com and on that website. If you need some help because you're in a certain condition, haven't got enough money for a ticket, like I say always, let me know. Yeah, I just want you to get there. I want to make it as accessible as possible to everybody. Right, that's said and done. Let's bring that down. And I'll give her a little 5-second countdown, and I will introduce to you Dr. Izzy Moore. There we go.
Hello.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
That's okay, no worries.
I'm so conscious of I just want to get talking to you, let alone other people listening. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us.
That's okay. It's great. Thank you for the invite to come and chat, and also for the conference. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm really pleased. No, I mean, like I said to you offline, so I didn't want to kind of make your head suddenly swell now without letting you know. But honestly, amongst the other 9 speakers, and as you know, there's some really respected speakers out there. You are the person who they most want to see and meet.
Well, hopefully live up to expectations, but it would just be good to get all of us in the same room. I think I'm really, really excited to meet a lot of them that I've never met either. So should be good.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it'd be great. And like I said to you before, I'm really excited about you guys meeting each other as well, because especially in these days of social media, you can know somebody maybe for 5, 6. There's some people there for 10 years who I've been watching and I haven't actually met them. And you can get the wrong impression without mentioning any names. You can watch someone on social media and think they're an absolute monster, and think, I don't think I'm going to like this person. Then you meet them and you realise, in most cases, no, in all cases, I think for me, they're actually human. Surprise, surprise, and they're all right, and you're probably on the same page. But anyway, so yeah, thanks very much, and that would be great to see you live in October as well. Right, so where do we start? Let's have a little look. I've definitely created a sheet. I've got so many questions I want to ask you today, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. So, running research. One of the leading researchers I described you as in running injury and performance, and not just the UK, really. I mean, it's international, isn't it? Your papers. Do you recognise that, or?
Well, it's very nice for you to say. I guess that's where we're hoping we can aim to be. I think I'm still building a bit of momentum, but I think actually social media has definitely helped with actually broadening the base of individuals I'm interacting with. So I'm certainly interacting with a lot more international researchers than I was before, probably about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's wicked. I think, well, you managed to, and I respect you for this, you managed to, or maybe you have to, stay away from social media. I think we were chatting before. I mean, you probably think, yeah, well, it's not my choice. I just haven't got time. I'm a researcher. I haven't got time to be out there on social media. But I think it was interesting, and I'm jumping in here ahead of myself because I knew I would. But obviously, if you are involved in the world you're in, you haven't really got time, have you, to be on social media talking about it, or the desire?
Yeah, it can be challenging. You kind of, I guess, you need to know what you want to use the social media for. So I tend to be a lot more active when I know that we've got research that's coming out, rather than necessarily engaging with just day-to-day kind of ongoing thoughts and discussions. Because so I try not to kind of take it all home and spend lots of time at home, even though that's when I think actually things are perhaps more active than during just kind of the work hours. and it's very easy to get drawn into when people do start debating. So I've fallen into the trap a few times. Like I say, I'm getting better at trying to use an app to put tweets out at certain times rather than necessarily having to do it myself when there is something to say. So I try and stick more to when I know I've got something to say rather than just general thoughts. I suppose that's my tactic anyway.
And is it tricky sometimes when you do dip in there, just have a little look maybe, when you see kind of some of the stuff getting put there, particularly with research? Because again, in terms of keyboard warriors, it's a very easy area to kind of suddenly criticize a paper and say, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? This paper's rubbish. And you, who obviously know the work that goes into it, you're probably sitting there thinking, how little you know.
Yeah, it can be. There are often times where you half write a tweet and then just delete it, and just you have to try and weigh up. Is it worth the energy to engage? Are you actually going to be able to get a sensible discussion and dialogue going? Because sometimes it is really nice to hear and understand what people are picking up on, what they don't see is useful. But yeah, it can. I've definitely learned not to engage in everything, because sometimes to be honest, it isn't actually as worth it from our time or perhaps our anger levels to do it. Yeah.
How about for the people you teach, your students? I mean, do you still kind of sell social media as a good way to keep in touch with research?
Yeah, I tell all my new PhD students mainly to get on it and just start following people in their field, start retweeting articles that are useful for you and your research in your field, essentially what I did. And then people will start to understand kind of what you're doing. And then in time, it can be a really useful platform to promote your research to non-academics. I think that's definitely the bonus that I found. But I've also kind of got some invites to speak in terms of like at different conferences, more at kind of clinical level, and podiatry association and footwear associations, rather than perhaps the international academic pure conferences. It opens up a different audience. But I do always say to them, in the initial stages, I definitely just stay away from trying to get too involved, and always remember that what you say then gets seen, and gets seen by your employers, your friends, people you might in future want to collaborate with. So be mindful if you're going to start hammering an article. It can be a two-way street as well.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. So what about in terms of keeping up to date? I mean, research is sold online as something that you should be looking at every day. I did an interesting kind of just a questionnaire for a few people, for therapists out there. How many research papers do you manage to read a week? And it was interesting. I mean, in actual fact, the results I had was like, apparently 75% of the people that I asked read more than 3 research papers a week.
Oh.
And I was quite surprised. Now, obviously, no one's really going to answer me on social media and go, I don't read any, because they've got nothing to gain from that. Yeah. But even 3 to me a week seems quite a lot.
I mean, I'll hold my hands up and say even I don't hit that number. I haven't probably read a full paper in several months. I read more of them when I've got a lecture to prep or a paper that I'm writing. It's very hard to keep up to date. I spend more time probably looking at the titles and then the abstracts, and then making a decision. I also have a folder in my inbox of reading, which I haven't opened in a good couple of months, but I tend to just stick everything in there and hope that day comes when
it's a never-ending list, though. I do that as well. I've got my little organized things of things to read, and it's all categorized into different pain or running or gait. And I don't think I've dipped in them for quite a while. Very well presented if I ever needed to.
Mine's just one big folder, and I just have links in it, and I don't even know I have to actually click on those links, so I don't know what those papers are anymore. And I'm like, oh, Oh, interesting.
It is hard, isn't it? So, I mean, a lot of it is there's a big onus out there, and a lot of people are shouting at therapists saying you need to keep up to date with the research. It's all part of this evidence-based practice, which is like very topical and is being pushed a lot, which is kind of cool, obviously. But I'm interested to, as somebody who's involved in the research and providing, part of that evidence, then how significant is the research? How much weight should therapists be giving to the research in order to provide evidence-based practice?
Probably it's a whole podcast in itself, but yes, there are definitely some papers that are better quality than others. There are definitely, every paper is written with a bias because we're only going to do research and things we're interested in, and therefore that's our bias that we bring. So I imagine it is very difficult to be able to wade through it all and be able to then yourself synthesize the good and the bad from that, because that's what we spend 3 years teaching students to be able to try and do, and it's hard to then do that on top of keeping up to everything. I think we provide more tools that people can use rather than necessarily kind of guidance of, okay, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. It's more actually this might be useful. Our gateway training paper, for example, isn't okay, right, you should do this step by step. It's more, okay, now we found internal focus is good, so just bear that in mind and maybe use that as a first port of call before an external, for example, rather than, okay, this is what this paper's showing, I'm going to do exactly what they've said. I think that's kind of how I would see using the research. Is kind of, okay, here's a tool that I could potentially look to use, and it's probably useful to have a few tools in your repertoire as a clinician.
That's cool. No, that's cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that idea of using it as a tool as opposed to just a recipe to be a successful therapist. This is, I mean, one thing that it does cause a bit of controversy is this diagram. Let's just bring this up here. And the idea that when people are arguing pro and con of being an evidence-based therapist, often they'll bring up this kind of stool thing. I'm just going to take myself off here for a sec. Let's put it like that so we can see it a bit better. Oh, that'll do. So on the stool, then it just kind of reminds people that, yes, the research is there and it's important to be aware of it. It's the way we move forwards. But we've also got clinical experience, which some therapists will argue put more weight on it, as in what actually you see works in clinic. So some research might be very interesting and wonderful, but the actual use it is in actual real life clinic time might be less. And then you've also got the patient expectation, which is the other stall on here, because if you're going to run a business and you're going to see human beings, you've got to remember that they've come here with a certain need and a design. You can't just say, no, you don't need that at all. What you need is this, because the research says here. Izzy Moore said, we're going to do this, so that's what we're going to do. So, I mean, those three there, do you see them evenly weighted, or how would you comment on that kind of stool diagram?
Yeah, it's an interesting diagram. And having worked with a lot of sport and exercise medicine practitioners, particularly students, we've got a master's course here. They certainly bring a lot of valuable clinical experience that we would never be able to put in an article. And actually, a lot of that might actually inform our research in the first place. So it's very difficult to just kind of see it maybe as, and each patient probably is different. You might actually weight it differently based on what walks through the door and what injury or problem you're faced with. If you're faced with something that doesn't have much research, you're going to have to go on other things. So it's probably something that becomes balanced and weighted differently depending for each problem. And again, the patient element is something that I don't do a lot of research in and around. We try not to ask them too many things and too many perceptions, because that's just another variable and something that we have to throw into our statistical model and deal with. But having been a patient, having gone through 2 ACL, reconstructions myself. That kind of the relationship and their beliefs, you can't ignore them. And it's probably worse now because of things like social media and what they have access to. Worse might not be the best word, but when I was going through rehab, I had good trust in my physio, and probably on the basis that she had good clinical experience. She was very experienced in ACL rehab, and I probably had the assumption that it was based on some sort of evidence, but I didn't really ask about it when I was younger. So I'm not, the patient element, I don't know how much they always ask or want to know about the evidence. They probably just assume that it's mixed in with your experience and what you're treating them with. So it's probably not a balanced one, depending on who and what walks through the door.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a very wise answer. Yeah, you can't weight them. It's always going to depend on who walks through the door and what situation you're dealing with. Yeah, it's very true. And that's probably the art of being a therapist, is being able to change the weight according to the situation and the person in front of you. But it's you're not on social media, so you wouldn't be aware of the huge debates. You can imagine them, where the people who are trying to justify what some would regard as pseudoscience are saying, yes, but just because science hasn't proven it and it's not, the studies don't prove it, doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just science doesn't know how it works yet. And other people say, no, that's ridiculous. You've got to make sure the research supports it, otherwise you're wasting your time, and then blah, blah, blah. It goes backwards and forwards. So I think your answer is probably the most diplomatic and the most sensible that I've heard so far.
Sitting on the fence, basically, yeah.
Yeah. I will give a shout out to Eric Mira, who kind of suggested, I liked his idea of saying that rather than it being a stool, it's actually more of a funnel. Because which starts with the best available evidence and the research, but then you have to kind of filter that and incorporate, the patient view and expectation and how it works. And as long as you kind of move maybe in that order, in that direction, then that, if you are going to promote evidence-based practice,
Yeah. I guess as well, sorry, I was going to say, sitting as a researcher, I know that there's a lot of papers out there that aren't that good. So it's very hard to say, I'll just dive into the research and what the research says, then follow it, when that research may not be the strongest research in the first place. So I think the more you kind of know about one of those levels, the perhaps more skeptical you might become at how much you use it.
Which leads me on nicely to the next question, because I never really understood this, and maybe you can kind of help. How come there is so much poor research out there? Or is it bad of me to say that, because I'm kind of judging that some is poor, but some of it, when I read a critique of it by somebody who I admire, and they kind of, highlight some information, some of the, maybe it's something as simple as there hasn't been adequate blinding or something, or that the sample was informed before what to expect, or something that seems so basic. Why do these people how do they publish it? Why do they bother publishing it? What's the deal?
I guess we've got a hell of a lot more journals than we used to have, and so from a kind of academic perspective, we know these are the stronger journals, and then there's kind of middle ones, and then there's less strong ones, and so those journals want papers, and there's a lot of academics who perhaps haven't had the training to do the high quality research, because we all have different kind of training from different institutes, or they have multiple pressures. We're all under pressure to publish good quality, but also publish volume. But in previous years, it used to be a lot more about volume, so that probably drove it up. And we need to show that we've got track records to get money, so we need to get some publications out there to show it. So we might do kind of the quick and dirty publication, which is just a straightforward, simple one, so that we can get to the more high quality one. So I think that it's kind of a storm of why that all happens, and then it just makes it harder for people who don't have the time, the training or inclination to want to wade through trying to decipher what is good and what is bad. And what I think is good. Someone else from a different field will pick up on other things that they don't necessarily agree on. But ultimately, we all have a certain time, and we want to publish and improve people's knowledge. So if it's taken me a year to get 10 participants, am I going to spend another 2 years to get 30 or 40 that people would be happier with? If I know that my stats and the strength of what I'm finding is okay anyway. So there's a whole mix of why that we have potentially the problem or what we see at the moment.
It's lovely hearing it coming from you, because online it seems like the thing that's always pushed is the reason there's poor quality papers out there is because they're being funded by somebody who wants to get their message across, and that's why they're kind of paying for it and pushing it out there. And you get the impression, if you look online, that this is really what the problem is. But obviously you've just highlighted the fact that it's pressure to fill up the journals. It's also a business thing where they've got to fill the pages. You've got something as innocent as an academic who's just not that experienced, and they're doing as good a job as they can, and they're probably really proud of that paper. But
the resources that they have, so labs differ. If a lab doesn't have a 3D motion capture system because they cost about $100,000 to install and get a new one, then they've done 2D, they've done what they can do.
It's really, who would have thought, it's really insightful listening to someone who's actually in the business as opposed to someone just sitting at a keyboard talking about it. It's good. I'm hoping that a lot of people listening to this will reflect the same way as I am when you actually have it coming from the horse's mouth, if you'll excuse the expression. But yeah. So one thing though that you did mention, I can understand the lesser known journals producing maybe lower quality studies, but that implies that if you go to a big journal, that all, what I'm going to say, don't you, that everything that appears in it is going to be really good quality. That's not always the case, is it?
No.
So any theories? I mean, what you said so far, presumably they've got the volume to pick and choose what they put in. They've got the funding. They've probably got people there who can proofread it and check it. So
again, probably there are multiple reasons. Often your name helps. Your name in terms of reputation, your name in terms of who you know on the editorial board, and although we might not like to think that comes into play, I think we'd be naive to think it doesn't. Particularly, I don't know the ins and outs of journals, but I have heard quite a few things on the grapevines, and we've had knockbacks because of. I'm pretty sure I could know who the reviewers were, who were people who were friends with them. So those sorts of things happen. And I think sometimes it can just be topical. So if it's a solid name and it's a piece that you think is going to get lots of citations, that's going to improve your journal's rating. So a lot of journals have become, I think, quite tactical in what they publish. So it improves their metrics. So things like editorials, which aren't really, they're not experimental studies or necessarily publications that we're used to seeing. They're more opinion pieces. They tend to get cited through the roof and almost inflate your impact factor as a journal because of how that calculation works out. But they're not actually kind of, if my students, for example, were hanging their hat on an argument based on editorial rather than a tested study, I'd tell them to go and have a look at their references and pick up that critique. But editorials are shorter, so they're more digestible, I guess, from a readability point of view.
Yeah.
So there's all those kind of things that I think play into it.
Yeah. It struck my mind. I'm guilty of, and again, I want you to correct me on this, but as soon as I see that a research paper has been funded by somebody who's going to have a bias, I'm like already dismissing that paper, which isn't probably fair because research takes money, doesn't it? And if you can only get money from somebody, you could still have somebody who's funding it who would quite like everybody to be weighing, for example, I don't know, Vibrams. But they may be really good people who just want to do the quality test, and they may well own up at the end of the test if the answers didn't kind of support their original kind of thesis, then they'll say it. But it's quite a big one, isn't it? If you do see a paper that's being funded by somebody and the result coincides with what they're selling, it's tricky to take that paper seriously, isn't it? Or
yeah, and I guess being on this side, I know that they do tend to review the papers before they're published. So most of our rugby papers, we work with the Welsh Rugby Union. We have the head of medicine as our co-author. But they've actually been extremely good. When we go, your injury rates are massively high. They never want to hide that. They've never tried to do that. They've been great to work with. But I've had others look over papers that are very eager to change sentences and phrases and come back with. Essentially, we have to go through review of comments before we've sent it off to publish. So I think it's definitely something to be wary of. But at the same point, footwear is probably a prime one. If you want to test footwear, who else is going to pay for that research than companies that want to see if their shoes work in independent capacity? And often those individuals might not read those papers. It depends on the funding relationship. So, it's sometimes I would say look at it, understand it, but if the results are quite compelling, other than making up that data, which I'd hope that most academics wouldn't go down the path of, it might just be the subtleties of how they've explained the results and described it, but the data itself should be the data itself.
Cool. Okay, let's move into a more positive tone rather than people making up data and stuff. Because how easy is it to actually for therapists to get the research? Is there a lot of free stuff out there? What sort of percentage do you think of papers can therapists get for free?
Probably quite a low proportion. I think most journals they won't have access unless the paper itself is open access, which essentially means the authors have had to pay for it. There's some figures around about £3,000 I had to pay once when I get a publication open access, which is why I can't do that every time I publish. But I just recommend people just contacting the author and asking for it. If you're struggling, if you put it on Twitter, I know quite a few people ask for it on Twitter and probably get good responses. And if that doesn't work, I just drop the author an email, because quite often we're just happy that people are reading it. So we can send then our copy that we have on to people.
It's funny you should say that, because I did find an example of that, and you're a fantastic example of, I think you were tweeting out saying if you want the free text and here's the link and so forth, and it's surprising how many authors are very happy to do that. There's when you were doing access to the full test of our gateway training paper with Tom Goom and son, and you gave a link out. But I did a little survey on online as well, just about where people get it from, and it was encouraging to see how many people said, I just emailed the author. And most of the time, if they don't get back to me, maybe they're just too busy, but when they did read the email, certainly, there you go.
ResearchGate is probably the next best place. So it's kind of the academic kind of equivalent of our CVs that are out there of kind of here, and they might not be the issue is they might not be the final PDF. Right. For the time, they might be kind of the Word document that then got formatted for the PDF, but often authors will put versions of the article that are as near as publication level as possible on there as well. So that's cool. And I mean, I think I just want to bring up a screenshot of PubMed, because that's one that often people will go to. And it's not, I don't think it's that clear on there how to just bring up the free text, because the links are a little bit small. So I'm just going to bring that up here, because when people do go to PubMed, let's just bring this up and put it there by itself. You can see when you're on there, there are clear links which show, I mean, you do a search, for example, put in the author's name or something. I think on this one, I put in your name. And down on the side, there are
boxes there which you can select whether you want to see pay only or free reads and stuff, and as soon as you tick that, it changes the sample you've got in front of you to the free ones. And like when I did it with you, there were still plenty of papers there which were still free access, and you're led there and you can see the whole thing. And I think a lot of therapists don't realize that, but it's a great way of filtering it on PubMed just to get the free ones. And also at the bottom of the page, when you bring up a paper, there's another little box there which you can easily miss, where it shows you links to possible ways of seeing the text for free. So it is there, and I don't know, I just got the impression that a lot of maybe new therapists, I don't know whether it's taught enough on courses or whether you're on what level of studies, but there does seem to be a lot there anyway for therapists to be getting on with, and not just read the abstract, which is another interesting thing. I think Daniel Gerber, osteopath, I think he's still an osteopath, there's a story there somewhere, Daniel, but anyway, from Glasgow, he asked a question a bit of a while ago. Sorry, Daniel, to keep you waiting. But yeah, how often does Izzy find the abstract misleading? It's a personal bugbear of his. What do you think about abstracts? Are they something which just are dangerous, or can you extract enough information from them, or does it just depend?
Yeah, to be honest, it depends. I think when I used to start doing mine, I probably didn't realise the value of them. Again, similar with my title, because actually that's the way I filter things first. I have to go by title. I don't have enough time to read it all. And so abstracts, yeah, we'll try and put the key information. But often if you've measured multiple things, that will only really give you part of the story. And if it's been a bit of a struggle, then, you know, as Daniel says, they can potentially be a bit misleading, and tell you half the story or less than that. Bearing in mind it's 250 words to get everything across. But yeah, I have read some where you read it and go, oh wow, okay, they've concluded that, and then you read the extra page and you're like, oh, I'm not too sure. But I tend to just look at the kind of main data bit and see if it's interesting. But again, we have to cherry pick what we put in to make it fit. So often we'll have to leave out a lot of the details. So it is really just a kind of, does this get your interest, rather than here's the full story, what do you think? That's the main point of an abstract, I guess. It's a summary. And
it's totally up to the author as to the content of that. It's not proofread or anything. It's what you read is.
I get you. So you know, as a reviewer, I've reviewed many articles. We get the abstracts. So again, it depends. I guess quite a few reviewers might glaze over them and assume they know the study. I've tended to go through them, correct numbers. Sometimes there can be mismatches between the abstract just because of we're all human, and the main body of text. But quite often I've never had to go through an abstract and say this is completely wrong, I wouldn't have put this. I may not have written it that way, but it's their article at the end of the day. Yeah. So yeah, they do get. Pardon?
Do you review a lot of papers? Do you get asked to do that, or
so I used to do a lot more since I took on a kind of a program director role at the university and had more PhD students. I've had to say no more times than I've said yes recently. I try to, at least as a minimum, do as many reviews as I do publish in a year. As a kind of, it's kind of, if you're publishing, you can't really say no to everything. But it's something that we don't. I think there's a lot on Twitter at the moment you don't get paid for. It's a bit of a thankless task sometimes. It does tend to drop off the end of a to-do list. So I have reviewed quite a lot, but I've taken a step back in recent year, really.
Yeah. I think it's quite amazing that I think there was a post by Greg Lehman the other day where he just kind of highlighted the fact that somebody contacted him to review some papers, and I think he just asked for like, well, okay, I need full access to all of your papers, and I need I don't know, for the next 6 months or something. They said no, it's like, we want it this week or something, or we can't give you all that data. And Greg was like, well, how am I going to review these papers if you're not giving me this information and these timelines? And he just said, sorry, no, I can't do it then. And also you don't get paid for it. You know, it's just like, can you spend some time doing this, please? Because you've got nothing else to do. But yeah, I thought that was incredible. I didn't realize you don't get paid for it.
No.
Yeah, I don't understand that. But anyway, hey, we're getting negative again. Cool. Okay, let me have a look down my list and see how much I've actually forgotten about. I think we've gone in pretty good order so far. PubMed. The other one again, I just wanted to mention, and like you're at Cardiff, aren't you? Cardiff Met. Students, do they get access to many journals there?
Yep, tons.
Yeah. Do they use them? Do you think as much as they can, or not your students? Obviously, they're on there every day, but in general, do students take advantage of it, or?
Not as much as we would like them to.
That's a good answer.
I would be my honest appraisal. We recommend reading every week, most of us. Usually we give them that text. During the dissertation, that's probably when it comes into the forefront more. I think we probably need to get better at kind of actually now teaching search strategies, which we don't necessarily always do. But they do get, every year we kind of get requests saying what journals would be useful. Has it changed? We've already got all of this access. So at university, students have a huge amount of access from a journal perspective. And I think it's probably not until their final year when they have to do a dissertation that they take more advantage of it.
I think it was quite a popular answer when I put the questions out online that, if you've got a friend at university, because it's almost ironically, it's not until maybe you've been in practice for a couple of years, you actually think, you know what, I actually want to use that free access now. But yeah, you can, I don't know what the permissions are like, but yeah, a lot of people will contact their friend at university and say, you know what, you got access to that. Can I see that paper? I mean, that's another good way of doing it. I don't think it's breaking any rules. I'm not sure. Forgive me if it is.
No. And it might even make a student read the article, so it might actually be.
Might encourage them. That's a good thing. Peer learning. Yeah. Well, if he's interested or she's interested, then maybe I should read it. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, for therapists out there, because what I want this chat with Izzy to do is to show that you have maybe got more access than you thought. Via free access on PubMed, or looking up ResearchGate, or even just asking friends at university, contacting the author, which I thought was a lovely one. I imagine if you're in control of your inbox, which I'm sure you're not, and it just gets overladen with emails, but it must be quite nice, I guess, to have somebody going, oh, really interested in this text, depending on how they ask. But is that the case? Is it nice to know people?
Yeah, we publish, and then we're never really too sure how many people actually do read the full text, especially in this day and age where people would rather a 2-minute video or an infographic. So you're right, we may not turn it around in a day or two, but often it's quite nice to have a bit of a dialogue with someone. They might have questions, and they tend to be questions that you wouldn't have thought of, or you've had from other academics that read it. That's what I tend to find anyway. I have a few coaches every now and again send me an email, and they often say things that I've literally never thought about. So it's actually quite nice. It opens a bit of a dialogue, which might be useful for both parties, I think.
I think it's natural, especially for younger therapists, to see the names of the authors with just the surname and a couple of initials and think, oh no, I can't contact them. I mean, they're not on my level. They're just like these people up there. But at the end of the day, if people realize they probably like to be contacted, and they're humans, they're doing a lot of hard work, and they like to know that people are reading it. And then also like a lot of researchers haven't got time to share the information and share the paper. So if someone else is doing that for them, then that's good news as well, I guess. And I was quite surprised to hear that, because one of my worries was if people are finding ways to access these papers without paying for it, then that's taking funding away from actual research. And it was like, oh no, don't do that. You should only really pay for it. But apparently it's not.
No money away from, well, not to my knowledge, but it doesn't impact the funding that we get or that I've ever had.
So people so the money that's charged, I mean, some people belong to really good organizations as part of the package, then you get access to the journals, which is fantastic. But the money which is charged for journals or to see particular text isn't one of the kind of funding, the fountains of money that goes into then help research. No, I thought that was quite crazy.
Not to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure it just goes to the publishers.
Yeah.
And the publishers don't well, I've not heard of a publisher funding any sports science type research, so I don't think.
Interesting one. Okay, so because for me personally, that would always be in the back of my mind, like, oh no, I definitely wouldn't tell you about this, because if I tweet a free link, hey, guess what? You can get access to Izzy's Gate retraining paper here. I'll be thinking, oh no, because indirectly I'm taking money away from future stuff, but it's not the case. Okay, well, that's a bombshell. That's an important one, I think, for therapists out there as well. If you find a free link, then share it, because the research is not losing anything. Yeah. It's not like where you're downloading an illegal song or something, or a torrent, and it's not pirate.
No. Once we've published, I think most of the time we sign over rights to the version that the publishers end up producing. So if someone has a version of that, we don't lose out. So,
okay, interesting. That's really, I think that's really significant. Yeah, that's a significant answer, I think. I didn't realize that myself. Cool. How are we doing? Let's have a look. I think I know the answer to that. I mean, it's very tricky to tell whether a study is of high quality or not. I think it depends case to case. But you can just say no if you want, but are there any particular things which scan reading you can look out for where you think, oh, that's a bit of a red flag, or is it just a case by case?
Probably case by case, but my best advice would be, if you're looking at kind of biomechanics and it's in a journal that is Journal of Biomechanics, Journal of Applied Biomechanics, or your Scandinavian Journal of Sport Medicine or Medicine and Science and Sport and Exercise, they're probably going to be decent biomechanics in there. Whereas if they're in journals that aren't a biomechanics focused journal, then they're going to probably get less scrutiny over the biomechanics methodology and processing that's required. So that would do it. Like EMG is probably the easiest one to say. A lot of people use it. It's actually a very difficult data to process and analyze well. And so when you see perhaps a lot of EMG in some journals that aren't notoriously kind of the science and perhaps more practitioner applied journals, it might be that data isn't as good or hasn't been processed as well as maybe if it was in the Journal of Kinesiology and EMG. That's going to be a good EMG paper.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So the actual journal, if that's their subject matter, they don't want to publish anything which is a bit shabby because it's their reputation as well on the line, kind of thing.
The kind of rule of thumb, they're probably ones, as we discussed earlier, you slip through the net. But in terms of rather than having to know the ins and outs of signal processing for EMG, which does bore most people, that's just probably one way to look at it.
Yeah. What about terms like, I mean, let's go from what I think the most basic is, or the answer might not be, but things like sample size is one which is often quoted on Twitter or Facebook. Often it's maybe something where the sample size is quite small. I don't know how we decide what small is, but how do you look at a paper and how do you know whether the sample size is going to mean it's low study or low quality? Or it's not always a case of the bigger the sample size, the better, no?
No. So sample size is to do with like the power, which again, I won't necessarily get into specifics, but one of the main differentiations between maybe a good study that has low numbers is in the methods. They'll have what they call a power calculation of, we use some information to calculate what is the minimum number of participants we need. And usually we might try and get a bit above that, but that's our threshold. Whereas some won't have that calculation, so it doesn't allow people to determine it. So that calculation is kind of how can we maybe find a difference? What's the smallest sample size I need to find that difference? And so if we're pursuing kind of high quality work, we're always encouraged to perform those calculations so that we know, okay, I need to target 12. And actually in a lot of biomechanics research, because of the accuracy of our systems and the interventions, quite often we don't need large numbers to find it. But the more kind of complex your study designs, more factors you're testing, the sample size tends to increase. That's probably the kind of straightforward answer. So no, the low sample sizes I often have a go at my students as a bit of a lazy critique. You know, if you can use that if you know why low, because it's underpowered and therefore I can't take the kind of results as meaningful. But if it's a low sample size and it's adequately powered, then we have no issues with our interpretation.
Okay, no, that's interesting. That's good. So that's something you can look out for. How about the whole blinding thing? Because that's something which confuses some therapists when they're looking at who's blind and who's not, and whether everyone needs to be blind, and how can you possibly do it with everyone blind? And tell us a little bit about blinding, maybe from your own personal experience.
Yeah, so it does depend on what intervention you're trying to run. A lot of the time it's probably impossible to blind certain things, and you then have to come up with shams. What you tend to find is the participants get blinded. And the double blinded is then when also people who are analysing the data are blinded to what group, so just get the data, analyse it without knowing. So there's kind of different levels, and I guess probably a lot of the typical sport and exercise medicine research doesn't tend to be blinded because there are perhaps ethical questions around if you really know that one intervention is going to work, why would you want to give another intervention and then blind people to what they're doing? And particularly if we're doing manual techniques on people, you can't really blind them to that. So I've never used blinding in what we do. We just tend to give people minimal information. So, for example, the recent gait retraining paper we did, we didn't even tell people we were looking at foot strike. It was as minimal. It was, we just want you just see how you respond. And people are like, respond to what? We're like, I'm going to say something, and just respond. Don't. And if they asked, am I doing it right? The response was there is no right and wrong. There was no information about the fact that we're looking at the foot prior to the cue being given, so it was all very kind of controlled in that manner, but wasn't necessarily blinded to what group they were in, because they didn't know what internal external focus meant anyway. But so we just tend not to use like psychology students in that example, because they will have an understanding of the underpinning theory.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you know that they don't know what's internal, external without us? It's almost like being a jury. How do you decide on what sample you're going to use?
So yes, a lot of the time it will be. So in that example, it was as long as they're not sports psychology or psychology students.
Yeah,
they're only going to be in one group, so they won't know that what the other cue is. They won't be able to pick up on the fact that how different it is and what it is on. And we used recreational runners, which tends to just be quite an active cohort that we have on campus. And a lot of those actually aren't even sports science students. They don't even have knowledge of running gait. And again, that does influence. We've had. I can't be a participant in any of our studies because I understand the theory, but I also understand what we're trying to look for, and therefore, and I'm quite good at changing my gait, having done it for a few years now. And likewise, if we get people who are very good at biomechanics in the lab and understand their running, again, they tend to be a little bit more clued up on what they're doing. So yeah, we've just tested about 20 people. And we kicked out a couple just because I wasn't convinced that, I knew one of them was a very good biomechanist. I was like, we shouldn't have had him. And he's done a very good job, but he knows what to do because he knows what to do. So
that's true.
Having worked with sports psychologists, I have a lot more kind of control now, I think. Biomechanics doesn't tend to worry too much. In the past, I haven't, but now sports psychologists are very good at making sure the whole environment, what you tell the participants, is very controlled, so we can specifically test that element of what we're doing.
And is there another? There's quite a few terms which people might come across. I did put in the advertising that people would find out what a p-value is, because that seems to be tossed around willy-nilly. But in a nutshell, p-value?
So in a nutshell, it's basically about probability. But actually, we're really testing So people write a hypothesis, usually that there's going to be a difference in whatever we're testing, but then so the null hypothesis is that there's no difference. And actually what we're testing is the null hypothesis rather than is the hypothesis true. So the p-value is, you know, are we actually finding a difference when there is no difference, and what's the probability of that? So we use 0.05 as like the golden figure. If it's under that, which means that there's 5% probability that we found something to be true when it shouldn't be. That's essentially what it is. I think over the years it's perhaps got a little bit lost, and there's statisticians banging their heads against the rule at how we use it. But yeah, some people use a 10% threshold, but essentially it's a 5% threshold of probability.
Yeah. And is it something that if you're critiquing a paper or something that comes into play and can render a study as low quality?
Or if the p-value is not significant?
Yeah. Is it something which, yeah.
I think we all like to have a significant value. We're human. We love to find that. But actually, a lot of the time, I'd say the strongest studies are when it doesn't actually matter what you find. If you the hypothesis, it just means you develop the theory and you go to the next study and you've got a different angle. Whereas if you support it, that's great, and then you've kind of shown some evidence for it. But you know, science is just about developing our theories and hypotheses as more evidence comes to light. So I think, if anything, we've got into a system where we always want you'll rarely find a study that hasn't found a significance somewhere, but there will be many
studies
where there haven't been a significant finding, but people might struggle to publish findings like that, or people might not want to.
They'll just use it for the next study or something, or okay, very interesting. Well, look, it's 2:27 already. I'm hoping, thinking back, I think there's an awful lot of information in there for not just new therapists, but seasoned therapists as well, in terms of finding research, what to do when you've got the research, valuing it and that sort of stuff. And also just having a bit more respect for the people who are doing the research when it comes to criticizing them, because there are humans at the end, like Izzy, who I'm sure they're very thick-skinned and they don't even read the reviews or things online. But it's still a case of just understanding who you're criticizing when you sit there at your keyboard talking about research. What are you on at the moment? What are you doing at the moment, Izzy? Have you got anything exciting you're working on?
We've doing a follow-up study paper we've just published. So we've got all the data. I have a few final tweaks to make, and then we'll have it all analysed. So we're looking forward to kind of getting that out in probably another year. Maybe it'll take us to, in terms of, again, another queuing one, but looking at efficiency and how that relates to your efficiency and smoothness of running. So that's my kind of big main one. But I've got a couple of PhD projects now doing some more kind of rugby medicine work as well. So hopefully in the next few years it'll be quite productive. So I'm looking forward.
Fantastic. It's amazing how when you say like that'll be around in about a year, it's amazing the timelines which you guys have to work on. Quite incredible. Must drive you quite mad. So you're coming out of Brighton, which is probably the most exciting thing for me. And you're gonna be talking about the research behind gait retraining and stuff, isn't it, in cues? And that's gonna be really valid to the people who come and see the conference. So thank you again for that. It's gonna be fantastic to see you live talking, and also the question time I'm really looking forward to, because you're gonna be on stage with 9 other speakers, and some of them will be pre-questions sent in. So just reminding people who are listening, if you are coming to the conference, and do email me some questions for people like Izzy and the other speakers. Other ones will just be straight from the floor, which I'm really looking forward to, just so the speakers won't know what's going to come up, and I'm hoping that will generate maybe some. Obviously, we're kind of all on the same page, but there's often, I'm sure there'll be some differences between what you adhere to and maybe JF Schoolier, definitely with Derek. It'll be interesting in terms of significance. So it'll be good. I'm looking forward to that. Fantastic. Well, I think what we'll do then, we'll wrap it up. Is there anything else apart from obviously the One Chat Live conference? You're going to be presenting anywhere else? Have you got anything else coming up?
I think we're hoping to get out to Monaco for the sun and for
Brighton will be sunny, but yeah, Monaco's all right as well. Which conference is that? What's that for?
It's the International Olympic Committee conference. Happens every 3 years, I think. So hoping to get out there and meet some new collaborators we're working with. But yeah, at the moment, this is the one for my running related stuff. So I'll make sure I bring my A game to it.
Well, it's important that people bring themselves to it because, like I say, I mean, yeah, it's not that often which you're actually there and ready to have people firing questions at you, and it'd be a great networking opportunity as well. And you're coming along to the social evening, are you? I booked your table at Las Iguanas. Favorite cocktail, or are you not a drinker?
If I do drink, it is cocktails because they're so sweet. So I'm not that fussy when it comes to cocktails as long as they're sweet.
Fantastic. Okay, well, it's 2 for 1, so we'll make sure you get 2 for 1 sweet ones all night. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Izzy, for giving up an hour of your time. A bit like research, and this is, you don't get paid for this, so thank you very much. Do appreciate it.
It's been really good, and hopefully there's some useful information in there for others.
Well, I'll be sure that, I mean, I get some emails and feedback, but if anyone listening to this, whether it's live or on the podcast, do tweet something. I think Twitter's probably where they're most likely to eventually get a response for you, or you see it. Is it Twitter?
Yeah, probably Twitter.
Yeah. And you are, is it all Dr. Izzy Moore, all one word?
I think it's Izzy Moore PhD. So.
Oh, Izzy Moore PhD, it's true. So yeah, on Twitter, find and do send something. Don't be, look, you can see it's a normal person. Okay, it's a human being, and guess what? She likes to hear from people and know that her research is being read, and yeah, so fantastic. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll speak before, but I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person in Brighton.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
I'll send you back down to the lobby. Hang around for a bit because I'll come down and thank you again in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to sign out. But yeah, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was Dr. Izzy Moore. Thank you very much, Izzy.
Thank you.
Right, wonderful. I always enjoy my guests because I pick my guests, so I know I'm going to get so much out of it. But I'm thinking back to what we've talked about and what you can gain from it. That's been a useful hour for people listening. Obviously, not so much for runners, but maybe it'll give runners an idea of what therapists have to go through to actually provide a good service, or what they should be going through in terms of keeping up to date with the latest research and evidence and stuff. Therapists, if there isn't some interesting, I mean, I think there's been a few bombshells in there myself. The idea that you can actually contact the author to get free copies, the fact that you could call on a friend at university, using PubMed, maybe that's something you didn't know about, and maybe just thinking twice before criticizing from your keyboard research papers out there. There's an awful lot of hot debates out there slagging off research and criticizing it and going, oh, these people shouldn't have even been able to publish it. But, maybe they're academics just starting out, and it's the old thing, walk a step in their shoes before you start criticizing them. So maybe I've got a bit more respect now for any paper out there. I feel a little bit less cynical. I don't believe that everybody who produces a bad paper is because they're being funded by someone who just wants to support their claims or the product they're selling. I feel less cynical thanks to Dr. Izzy Moore, and that's always a good thing. You don't want to be too cynical. But anyway, like I say, just to sum up, don't forget what I said at the beginning of this. BeLive software, if you're interested in getting to podcasting, you just want to try it, maybe you just want to play around for a month, interview some of your friends or guests, just test it out. Then the link is trial.be.live/podcasting. I will put the link in the notes, and if you're watching the video, it'll be underneath me at the moment. Trial.be.live/podcasting, a free month to try out BeLive online guest software. And your name will automatically go into a hat to win a blue Yeti Mic Blackout Edition, which will be drawn on October the 1st. So, give it a go and let me know if you do apply for it. Let me know if you win. That'll be fantastic to hear. Right. Thank you very much again to our sponsors, BeLive Beer Company. Thank you to Dr. Izzy Moore. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. Thank you for Daniel for the questions. As always, leave some reviews if you can on iTunes. If you do enjoy it, spread the good word. That's all we want to do, is get the good word out there. My name is Matt Phillips. This has been One Chat Live, episode 33. We will see you next week, which I believe is dun dun dun, drum roll added. I think it's Derek Griffin, believe it or not. Check on social media. We'll put it out there. Right. Goodbye. Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon. You're listening to Run Chat Live podcast, putting the evidence back into running injury and performance.